If it's Wednesday, we're live in Battleground, Arizona, a state with critical races up and down the ballot, and a place that shows how completely the former president has transformed the state GOP. Welcome to a special Meet the Midterms edition of Meet the Press Now. I'm Chuck Todd in beautiful Maricopa County, Arizona. When you see those wonderful cacti, you know where we are. We are also at the heart of one of our perennial battleground states these days, electorally speaking. And it might be the most important county in the country when you're asking about, quote, swing counties. There's nothing like Maricopa. The road to winning control of Congress goes through states like Arizona. It has several competitive statewide races this November. And it's not the only reason we're here. The state also has become the epicenter for the election denialism movement, started by former President Trump. It's swept through the Republican Party nationwide. And here in Arizona, wow, has Donald Trump had an influence. Republican primary voters nominated 4 statewide candidates who have all questioned President Biden's electoral victory in Arizona, and not just on the margins. They've questioned it straight up front. Carrie Lake for governor, Blake Masters for Senate, Abraham Hamadah for Attorney General, and Mark Finchem for Secretary of State. Several have endorsed the sham audits of the state's 2020 results. Several have backed anti-democratic small d laws for deciding future elections. If elected, these individuals would be in power for the 2024 presidential election and could play key roles in certifying results in a state that could very well decide the presidency in any given election. So these midterm candidates made it on the ballot by winning a plurality of votes in last month's Republican primary. No majority votes here, without much say from independents, who were going to be perhaps the most important voting bloc in November's general election. And last night I talked to a group of independent Arizona voters, some of whom have supported Republican candidates in the past, and they don't like what they see in this current GOP ticket.
I think that that's the danger that we're living right now, is that there are some folks that are really trying, and they have some really good intentions and good platforms and things that they want to run by. But as a whole, I don't recognize that party anymore.
What makes it impossible for me to support them is what they're really promoting is not effective programs or strategies to fix our problems. They're promoting distrust. And somebody is going to have to tell me how you can practice universal distrust of everything we've taken 246 years to build and operate a democratic republic.
I think, a more perfect union, that necessitates compromise and discussion and listening, and I don't see that from a lot of the candidates on the ticket.
In 62 days, the election here in Arizona is going to tell us whether the Republican embrace of election denialism is too much for voters in this very purple state heading into 2024. Look, Arizona has had a long history of a fringe element in its Republican Party, but these candidates are a major departure from recent Republican winners in this state, whether we're talking people like Governor Doug Ducey, Senators Jeff Flake, John Kyle, and, of course, the late John McCain. None of those Republicans feel like they would be comfortable with where this ticket is today. So we've got a jam-packed hour. We're going to show you much more from my independent voter panel, as well as my interview with a retiring Republican state senator. Live interviews with a couple of Democrats running statewide. It's everything you need to know about Battleground, Arizona for the hour. But first, joining me on the ground are 2 of the sharpest minds on the state of Arizona. From our shop, it's Vaughn Hilliard, an Arizona native, a Sun Devil, who covers the politics of this state for us, and the Washington Post's Yvonne Sanchez, who's covering a lot of voting issues here in the state of Arizona and is essentially the Washington Post's expert on all things Arizona these days. So welcome to both of you. Vaughn, thanks. You thought you were leaving Arizona, and there's no leaving Arizona. We have dragged you back here. I think my biggest takeaway so far is the fact that Carrie Lake, who many people around the country probably have thought, oh, is this more like Doug Mastriano or Tudor Dixon, Pennsylvania and Michigan, and she probably can't win. Oh, not only can she win, it seems like she's the favorite right now.
She's a real contender in this because for more than 2 decades, folks in Arizona, in the greater Phoenix area, have watched her on their television screens, make her the evening news at 9 and 10 o'clock at the popular station here. And suddenly she could hit that sweet spot. You know, Donald Trump lost by just 10,500 votes here. And if she is able to galvanize those same new Republican voters that showed up because of Donald Trump, while also convincing a few extra voters here in Maricopa County, those conservatives who had a hard time voting for Donald Trump, that, hey, she's okay in terms of being a Republican to vote for. She could be the next governor of Arizona, but it's going to be taking some of those voters, like the ones you just talked to convince them that she's an okay candidate.
Yvonne, what have you learned? You've been covering the election issue here in Arizona. Who's the driver in this election denialism? Is it the people, or is it these politicians riding this wave?
I think it's both. I see both obviously see each other as means to an end. And I think Kari Lake's problem is going to be holding on to some of those voters that you highlighted earlier, and moderate Republicans who, for the first time, are really sizing up their candidates, and they are really thinking about voting for a Democrat for the first time in their lives. So, I mean, she is a very real contender. She clearly could win, but it's going to take a lot of coalition building.
Look, when we national reporters parachute in here, we're looking at it through the national lens. And so, obviously, I've called this the epicenter of election denialism. But, Vaughn, for the average Arizona voter, what's the top issue?
I think when you're talking to folks, this is the issue.
It really has. Even local, you feel that animate. You feel like people are this animated.
Well, because election denialism is coincides and is parallel to Donald Trumpism.
Yeah.
And, you know, I got a text message the day after the election from a longtime LDS conservative here.
The most recent primary.
The most recent primary. After Kari Lake, after Abe Hamadeh, after Mark Fincham, after Blake Masters, the entire slate of Trump-backed election deniers won their primaries. She messaged me and she said, what has happened to my state? She goes, don't California, my Arizona, but also don't Trumpify my Arizona. Yeah. And that is where these folks here are lost. We saw, Yvonne and I, we've been at a lot of these county events over the years where you saw in Maricopa County, you know, years ago they censured John McCain. Yeah. You know, these folks have been here. But it is not until Martha McSally lost both of these Senate races that they were able to bubble up and maintain control of this Republican Party and now get these types of candidates into these positions and make the case, look, those more moderate candidates, they lost us, the state of Arizona, to Democrats. It's our turn.
You know, it's fascinating. He just centered it because it's a conversation that it's the question I get asked about Arizona from others who don't know the state. So, Yvonne, how do you answer this question, which is, how did... You know, if you look at it, the most successful Republicans to win have been in the mold of your sort of more establishment-leaning, dare I say, Mitt Romney-esque type of conservatism, whether it's Doug Ducey, Jeff Flake. I go back to John Kyle, who may be slightly to the right of a Ducey, but certainly to the left of a Kari Lake. What happened? How did that element of the party not squash the Kelly Ward, the ghosts of Kelly Ward, who they all tried to squash? Why did they fail?
So for a long time, John McCain was there trying to keep the party in order. He and his team, for a time, recruited precinct committee people to try to get the party back on track. Mm-hmm. John McCain's gone. Governor Doug Ducey has not been a fan of meddling or participating in party politics. You have no one there trying to keep things more moderate, more pragmatic. And so what we have then seen is the rise of Kelly Ward coinciding with the rise of Donald Trump. And people have treated her as though she is, you know, someone that they don't want to deal with. And guess what? She has grown. Yep. She has had the megaphone for a very long time. She has recruited precinct committee people. She has taken the party.
She's the captain.
This is the moment.
Huh? She's the field general.
She has led us to this moment. And this is going to be a test. Is this the model? Is this the way to lead the state party forward? Or do you go another direction?
I remember at early Trump rallies in 2015, Kelly Ward seeking cameras, coming to me. I had my camera out there. She was running against John McCain in that Senate primary there. Went on your show and suggested he shouldn't run because of his age. Right. She was fringe. Now she is the party apparatus.
She is the party, not just mainstream. She is the party. Look, I talked to a state senator who's decided, a Republican state senator, who's decided to walk away. And here's his take on what's happened to the party in his view. Walk me through. You started to see the Republican Party here change before the 2020 election, before the pandemic? Tell me about it.
Well, I mean, it used to be you'd have some of the not so normal beliefs, but they weren't as ubiquitous as they are now. They weren't so prevalent. And now it seems like it's become more mainstream, and even at the local level. So at district meetings where people will say, oh, well, Agenda 21 is, behind everything. And I'll joke and I'll say, well, have you heard about Agenda 21.5? It's even worse. Like, oh, I haven't seen that. They'll probably go back and look it up.
They don't have a sense of humor.
That's right, yeah.
And that just flies over there.
That's right, yeah.
I'm not asking you to be an expert on the other 49 states, but why do you think Arizona's sort of statewide ticket is so much farther out there than so many other Republican tickets?
Well, I think what our Senate president did by dragging out the audit, by weighing in, and not only weighing in, but giving credence to something that shouldn't have been given any credence whatsoever. I think by having a continuous news cycle, you have people that normally would be more on the fringe and not as credible. Now it appears that, oh, well, this documentary, 2,000 Mules, forget that they refuse to give over their data to our Attorney General. They've ghosted our Attorney General. They won't give him any data. But yet people still believe it because of people like President Fan that has fanned the flames of conspiracy theory.
Donald Trump seems to cause people to do and say things that they wouldn't normally do or say.
Yeah,
what do you make of that?
Well, I mean, for candidates, they think it's their ticket for higher office. And so they think that they need to appeal to a certain part of the Republican Party to get reelected or to get elected for the first time. And sadly, it's not even about, I have these strong convictions and whether or not I win, this is what I need to say to get elected.
Do you think it's pretty, with some of these candidates, does it look pretty transparent that they don't believe what they're saying? They're just doing it to get a fast pass to the nomination?
With some of them, I'd say 100%.
What did you make of President Biden's attempt to call out this wing of the Republican Party? He calls them MAGA Republicans. Do you think do you accept his premise that there are two versions of the Republican Party?
The commander-in-chief who said he was going to be a unifier, calling a certain part of the Republican Party MAGA, semi-fascist, or whatever he called them, I thought that was uncalled for. And if you're going to unify, then I don't think that's a good way to do it.
So what do you do? What would be your? Let's say the president comes to you and say, "Look, we don't agree politically, but we agree about the democracy. Tell me what I should say."
Focus on the idea. Always focus on the idea. Don't focus on the man or the woman. Don't focus on particular people within the party, but focus on, here's an idea, here's why it's lousy, and let's talk about the merits or the lack thereof.
I've heard these complaints. There's been no policy debates.
Yeah.
You're not having a debate about, well, should government do this or that?
Yeah.
That's not what this is about.
That's right. It's about re-election. It's about what people who are running for re-election think that they need to say to their electorate that will get them to continue. I don't know how we get back to what we used to be, but I know it's not a cult of personality. I know it's not deficit spending, which was normalized under Trump. And I know it's not following down these conspiracy theories.
And it sounds like you're not ready to vote Democrat.
No.
So, I mean, it does seem like you feel a bit trapped here.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're going to save the party, you're also walking away. So you must have something that, I'm guessing that bothers you too.
A little bit, and especially who's going to replace me. That really bothers me.
For what it's worth, Vaughn and Yvonne, Paul Boyer did say to me he's read his Cicero, and so he knows he may have to come back. But I find him as very emblematic of sort of, depending on the direction we go as a country, depends on essentially Republicans who aren't ready to be Democrats, who don't like what Trump's doing. What do they do? That if I knew the answer, I'd know what's going to happen. But I feel like he is emblematic of this sort of, okay, the fork in the road moment.
I think he referenced who's going to replace him in the state Senate. It's a guy by the name of Anthony Kern, who was outside of the U.S. Capitol on January 6th here. And I think most would agree this is a conservative state still.
Yeah.
Doug Ducey won this in 2018 by 14 percentage points. But the issue for Paul Boyer, out of the 16 state senators last year, he was the only one who voted no to jailing Maricopa County Board of Supervisors led by Republicans because the Arizona State Senate demanded that they turn over all of Maricopa County's ballots. And if it weren't for him voting no, they would have jailed the Republican Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. That hits at the question, if these folks do win, without Paul Boyer into office, if Kerry Lake is at the helm, what does governing look like in 2023?
And I think that's Yvonne, where do you sense those Republican voters are going to do? Do they skip races? Do they vote? Like, I tell you, I talk to these folks, and everybody's convinced, well, Mark Kelly can win those voters over, right? Yeah. That's what I always hear.
Yes.
He can. I don't, and then all of a sudden, there's some confidence in that there'll be enough votes against Fincham, that there's sort of this belief in the Secretary of State race, but not in the other two races.
No. And I think it's interesting to see Kerry Lake's strategy of not backing away from this, like Blake Masters, who is the Republican Senate nominee, has done.
She's doubling
down.
She is, but she's also not making as many appearances, it seems.
Perhaps not, but she hasn't completely shied away or removed things from her website that indicate where she stands, on this issue. And so in talking to a lot of moderate Republicans like Paul Boyer and independent voters, when they go into that voting booth, I don't think they're going to be talking about who they voted for, but I suspect a lot of them are going to be voting for Katie Hobbs.
They just can't bring themselves to
say it publicly. And they probably will not acknowledge
Well, I got a sense, Vaughn, that, when he's leaving politics, he's got a family, he's got small children, and I think he knows let's assume he might want to say he's going to vote for the Democrats. He doesn't want to be used as a political weapon. I also got that sense from him.
Again, he's a very conservative man. He's been involved in politics. He was called to be involved in politics because he cares about conservative issues. Yeah. And I know you're going to have Katie Hobbs, the candidate for governor, on, as well as Adrian Fontes, the candidate for Secretary of State. And ultimately, this comes down to these candidates being able to make that case effectively and appeal to these voters that it's okay to vote for them. I think the hard part is can you tap into that? Because Mark Kelly and Kyrsten Sinema, they were two very, very unique candidates. Yeah. And Joe Biden against Donald Trump, a very unique situation.
I just a recent history lesson. Look at all the statewide Democrats that have won here and notice how closely to the center they hew. Yeah. Someone reminded me today, Janet Napolitano sent a bill, to George W. Bush to help pay for the border. And so this is, you got to be a centrist Democrat these days because the state still has that conservative bent. Vaughn and Yvonne, thank you both. Great way to get started here in Battleground, Arizona. So coming up, an increasingly fragile democracy. And with this slate of election deniers that we just talked about on the ballot, I'm going to talk to the Democrat running to become the next Secretary of State and the current Secretary of State who's now running to be governor. You're watching a special edition of Meet the Press Now, live from outside of Phoenix. Welcome back to Meet the Press Now. We are live here in Battleground, Arizona. As you heard at the start of the show, our panel of independent Arizona voters was very wary of the direction of the GOP, but they're also not yet sold on the Democratic Party. Take a listen. None of you are ready to identify as Democrats. Why?
There are a lot of components of, the Democratic Party's agenda that I really agree with. Mm-hmm. But I hesitate to jump into anyone's side because extremism is happening on both sides.
What could the Democrats do to persuade you to become a member of their party? What do they need to do? How would they need to reform?
I agree with what Amy had mentioned about the extremism. So that's my biggest concern with the Democratic Party, is that there are some factions there too. So like everything in life, it could go either way. Mm-hmm. And if we're not careful, and if they're not careful, that party is not careful, I think they can find themselves in the same situation.
Joined now by the Democratic nominee for Arizona Secretary of State, which, by the way, in this state is basically the next in line for governor. And if you're wondering, that's how Jan Brewer became governor. I believe it's how Bruce Babbitt became governor, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, joining me now is that nominee for Secretary of State, Adrian Fontes. Mr. Fontes, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
Let me start. Let's address what those voters said about the Democratic Party. You've been an active Democrat. Make the case to those independent voters about, because the concern is, all right, I don't want that, but are the Democrats going to go too far to the left? Make your case to that voter saying, look, Here's what I'm running to do.
Well, I'm from southern Arizona, and as you may know, south of the Gila River, everybody says, everyone's a Democrat until they get electricity and running water. There's a lot of independence in Arizona, no matter what party you identify with. I would encourage voters to go issue by issue and pick the party that has the most commonality with your core values, because at the end of the day, you're never going to agree with everything that anybody says, right? We are all going to be thinking a little bit differently on this issue or that issue. But at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We want government to work efficiently. We want it to work well. We want it to be predictable. We don't want chaos and this wild-eyed fanaticism that we're seeing in some parts of particularly the political right, particularly in my opponent. So what we want to do is make sure to let voters know, look, we're just going to call balls and strikes, make it predictable, winners win, losers lose, and then we move on to the next cycle. And that's really what election administration ought to be about, and that's what the Secretary's office is about.
So what do you think is a legitimate transparency issue that maybe Arizona doesn't do that they ought to do?
Well, I think that there are a lot of things that Arizona does surprisingly well, right? I think that there might be a little bit more room in some of our public meeting laws. I think we could really have more transparency in some of our public record laws, but that requires resources, right? And unfortunately, we've had a legislature here dominated by a faction that doesn't want to spend money on good, efficient government, the right technology, the right other kinds of resources necessary to move things forward and make government work at the pace of business, which is what I think folks really expect, given the technological world that we live in. We need to give that to them, but that takes a little bit of time and effort and money. We'd like to get there.
You were telling me earlier, hey, I'm a happy warrior. But happy warriors don't always say the following. A lot of times people say this is the most important election ever. I don't tell people that. I tell people that this is possibly the last election ever.
Well, we've seen what...
I mean, that's dark.
Well, it is dark, but we've seen what the Supreme Court did to Roe v. Wade. 50 years of precedent down the tubes. A fundamental right down the tubes in a heartbeat. They said it was stare decisis. What are they going to say about the Voting Rights Act starting the first Monday in October? This Supreme Court acted in a vindictive way, and we've got to be careful about that because the Voting Rights Act could be next. Here's what we need to do. We, the people, need to take it into our own hands here in Arizona and in states across the country and say, we want to choose our path, and our path includes inclusiveness, access to the ballot, making sure every secure vote counts, and just being fair.
This, call it a virus of believing in election denialism, can you cure it with facts? Can you, or do you think some people don't want to hear what the truth is?
Look, the John Birch Society has been around for a long, long, long time, and it's morphed into all kinds of weird things. We've got some new stuff, the Oath Keepers and all kinds of other stuff, flat earthers. You pick it. It happens. This is America. People can think what they want to think. But as long as the vast majority of us still believe in the same truths and we still understand the same facts as facts, we're going to be okay. I have great faith in the American public. I have great faith in Arizona's voters. I wouldn't be running if I didn't.
It is striking that the person, you had been essentially the same job for Maricopa County. Is that
more or less.
Recorder of deeds?
Yeah,
I mean,
more or
there's
less.
different aspects to it. The person that defeated you, a Republican, has basically become his own version of a bulwark against conspiracy theorists.
Yep.
Just walk us through. I mean, this is somebody that you campaigned vigorously against.
And he campaigned vigorously against me and the program that I built.
And yet but there is sort of a sense of, hey, this is how the system works well. Here's two people that vigorously campaigned against each other, but the facts have remained the same, and he saw the facts the same way you did.
Well, he saw the facts the same way I did once he actually saw the facts. Once he got into office and he figured it out. This is what I want to do as Secretary of State. I want to invite the denialists into election offices around the state. Let them see the people who are actually running the elections. Let them actually learn about the systems without the conspiracies, just the facts. And I think just like Stephen Richer, who's an earnest guy, and he's doing a great job after having politically defeated me, he's backed up my program and bolstered the program that I built here in Maricopa County that ran so well in 2020. And I think we can do that with more folks. Again, the truth will prevail. And if we don't believe in that, then we are lost. But I think we do. I think we believe in that.
The other thing that came through with my panel of independent voters is that they feel pretty disenfranchised for this reason, right? That's a closed primary system. You know, here you have a state that really is a third.
Sure.
And yet the third of independents don't get to participate in some of these nominating contests. We know there's a top 2 and a top 4 ideas that are floating around, ranked choice voting. We know how Alaska, California. This is a ballot proposition state. Is that something that that you would support if it were on the ballot?
In 2019, I went to the Democratic State Party and I said, we need to open up our presidential preference election to independent voters. Now, my own party didn't back that up, but I wanted independents to be able to participate in the selection process for the Democratic nominee because independent voters are voters and because they're taxpayers. They support this whole system that they're really shut out of, and I don't think that's fair. If we get to the point where we can have a robust conversation about open primaries, for example, I think that's a conversation that I'd love to be able to host as Secretary of State, bringing in voters from all
Sounds like
stripes.
as a Democrat, you're not 100% for it, but you understand why independents would like to see this.
Well, no, I can't say that I'm not for it. I just don't know enough about what it'll look like. There's a whole bunch of different models out there. So as an election administrator, I can say, yeah, we can do it. But I also know there's 5 different really popular formulas for ranked choice voting. There's a lot of math there. But as an election administration professional, I already know those questions to ask. So I'm willing to say, let's have the conversation. Let's see what it could look like in Arizona. I'd be willing to host that. Now, there's some people in my party that don't like that.
No, I mean,
there's some people in the Republican Party that don't like that.
But the farther to the left or right you are, the harder it will be to win primaries that allow the independents in.
Well, you look, at the end of the day, independents are more than a third of our voters right now in Maricopa County. In fact, they're 3 or 4 points ahead of Democrats and maybe even up to a point ahead of Republicans right now. So we've got to pay attention to the reality out there on the ground. Government has to be responsive to the public, and this may very well be a way that we can do that.
Adrian Fontes, the Democratic nominee for Secretary of State. And, you know, I got to quickly ask, how do you prepare to be governor? Is that something you do, or you just, that's what the Constitution says?
Well,
it is the number 2 slot.
You got to make sure and do your homework. There's a whole bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with the Secretary's office. I do a lot of reading at night, Chuck.
Yeah, I bet you do. Well, stay safe on the trail.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, we got a lot more ahead in this beautiful and extraordinarily hot Maricopa County. Let's not beat around the bush there. But up next, we're still waiting for the Justice Department's next move after a judge granted the former president's request for an independent review of those classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago. Plus, what more we're now learning was reportedly in those documents. We got to update you on all of that. You're watching a special Meet the Midterms edition of Meet the Press Now. We are live from Arizona. Welcome back. As we await the Justice Department's decision on whether to appeal a judge's decision to allow what's called a special master to review the documents that were obtained from Mar-a-Lago by the federal government, the Washington Post is some new reporting on what some of those documents obtained in last month's FBI search included. According to the Post, people familiar with the matter say agents seized material on a foreign nation's nuclear capabilities. NBC News cannot confirm that report. The Washington Post did not say which classification markings, if any, were on that document. But as you will recall, there were some classified documents that were found that were deemed too classified for the actual FBI agents themselves to go through. They had to get somebody with a higher classification ranking. So let's bring in Ken Delaney. He's our justice correspondent here. So, Ken, the big question to me is, when are they going to make this decision on whether or not to appeal? And if they're going to appeal, why haven't they appealed yet?
It's a great question, Chuck. It's one I've been asking all day. I'm hoping to get some information maybe in the next hour, who knows, on at least when we might hear about an announcement on this matter, on that issue. You know, there's a number of steps they could take. They could do what's known as a motion to clarify, asking the judge to further explain some of the rather confusing aspects of her ruling, particularly around the idea that the notion that this special master would somehow be able to rule about which documents are and are not subject to executive privilege. That's something that normally a special master would never be asked to do. So it's not even clear how that's going to work. But no, we're waiting. We're waiting. You know, the other option they have is to partially appeal only the part that enjoins them from using the documents, which a lot of legal experts say is really a questionable move by the judge. They could do that. They could appeal the whole thing, or they could choose not to appeal on the grounds that it would just take too long, and they could live with the special master process. We're just going to wait and see, Chuck.
Ken, what you understand? What is the downside of them accepting this ruling? And doesn't it create its own? I know they're worried about the appeals process and the length, but doesn't this create a precedent that justice will regret someday?
I'm not sure that it's precedential because it's just a district judge's ruling, but it certainly is a bad decision in the view of the Justice Department and a lot of legal experts. And it could open the door to other regular criminal defendants just asking for a special master when none is warranted. And the other thing is this judge bent over backwards to say that this case was special because it involved the former president, even though there's nothing in the law that makes a former president any different from any other potential criminal defendant or subject of an investigation when it comes to classified documents. So, yeah, there's a lot of really questionable aspects of this decision that are troubling to a lot of legal experts. But nonetheless, also troubling would be like a 3-month delay in the investigation while this thing went all the way up to the Supreme Court. So that's the thing that the DOJ is grappling with.
And who could they possibly find as a special master that would understand what's an executive privilege claim? I mean, I think there are 3 living retired Supreme Court justices. That's about the length of the list I can think of.
Right, and then they would have to get special clearance, assuming they would be asked to review these highly, highly classified documents.
All right, well, we will be checking back in, and if it happens before the hour, Ken, then I'll see you here, and we'll find out what Justice is going to do. Ken Delaney at Justice Force. Ken, thank you. Got a bit of breaking news from the campaign trail in Battleground, Pennsylvania. That Senate race between Democrat John Fetterman, Republican Mehmet Oz. After some heated back and forth on the matter, NBC News has now confirmed that John Fetterman is now committing to one debate with Oz. Fetterman has been recovering from a stroke that he suffered just days before the primary. He says he's been battling issues with auditory processing issues. And as you recall, over the last couple of days, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and some other sort of less political entities have been raising some questions about Fetterman's health. So this may not be surprising that they wanted to end that narrative before it was getting traction. And in Washington, D.C. today, for the first time since leaving office, former President Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama were back at the White House for the unveiling of their official portraits. President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden hosted the event. As you know what happened with the last person who was supposed to host this event. Traditionally, presidents invite their predecessors to the White House for this unveiling. That didn't happen when President Trump was in office. Former President Obama reflected on how he wanted those portraits to be seen by future generations.
I've always described the presidency as a relay race. You take the baton from someone, you run your leg as hard and as well as you can, and then you hand it off to someone else, knowing that your work will be incomplete. The portraits hanging in the White House chronicle the runners in that race. Each of us tasked with trying to bring the country we love closer to its highest aspirations. And when future generations walk these halls and look up at these portraits, I hope they get a better, honest sense of who Michelle and I were.
After the break, the battle for governor here in Battleground, Arizona. What is at stake? Why the Democratic candidate Katie Hobbs is refusing to debate her Republican opponent. Katie Hobbs joins me next. You're watching a special edition of Meet the Press Now, live from Tempe, Arizona, just outside of Phoenix and home of the Arizona State Sun Devils. Welcome back. Turning now to perhaps one of, if not the most closely watched statewide race this fall, Arizona's current Democratic Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs, taking on Trump-backed Kari Lake in the race for governor. But they're not going to be facing off on a debate stage, at least not yet. Hobbs has formally declined to debate Lake, instead proposing individual interviews with a moderator. Katie Hobbs joins me now, and I know you have actually a forum tonight, correct?
Yes.
Is it the Arizona Chamber or Maricopa Chamber?
It's Arizona Chamber of Commerce, yep.
Why not go one? I want to get this process out of the way. I understand her experience doing this. Look, I get that. But sometimes those are the breaks. Why not debate her one-on-one?
Look, there is nothing I would like more than a substantive debate on the issues and an opportunity to contrast the robust policy positions that my campaign has put out versus Kari Lake's lack of any position on anything or plans or solutions. And we are still talking to the debate organizers about how to make that work. But Kari Lake is a spectacle, and she made a spectacle during the GOP primary debate. And They so far haven't proposed a format that's going to change that. And it put Arizona as the butt of national jokes. And I don't want to participate in that.
Is there, how about a Lincoln Douglas style, no moderator, where somebody basically says, okay, the issue is abortion. You start first, 3 minutes. Now you 3 minutes. Would you be willing to do something like that?
Well, we're willing to come to a compromise on a format that allows for a substantive discussion.
Let me ask about this larger issue. What do you, if we didn't have the issue of Donald Trump and election denialism basically just soaking up the attention, certainly national, what would you be running on as governor?
I am someone who is a born and raised Arizonan, and I've spent the campaign the last year plus on the campaign trail talking to Arizonans about issues they're concerned about, issues that our leaders have kicked the can down the road on for a long time, our water crisis, fixing public education, affordability is on voters' minds. And we need leaders who are going to address those issues, bring people together to solve these problems. These aren't Democrat or Republican problems. They are Arizona problems that need Arizona solutions. And I'm running to bring the leadership that we need to tackle those issues.
All of that sounds like an interesting top line. So let me dig in on one of them. Education. What does that mean? What is it that you want to do to the public education system here that hasn't been done?
Every Arizona student deserves access to high-quality public education, no matter where they live in our state. And we've continued to take resources away from public education, divert them into voucher schemes that don't create equal opportunity for all students in our state. We need robust investment in public education, starting with preschool all the way through post-secondary education. And we need to focus on how we attract and retain qualified teachers, because we're losing them every day in our classrooms.
Some charter schools here are run by the public school systems. Where do you put charter schools in this conversation?
Our charter schools are public schools. What you'll see from me is a call for more accountability and some of the same requirements that other public schools have. So they are part of the conversation of public schools, and they need more accountability.
What is that? The charter schools themselves with the accountability? Is that what you feel like is missing?
Yeah, and that's built into the system. A lot of the hoops that regular traditional public schools have to jump through, charter schools don't have the same responsibilities.
All right, let's talk about the water crisis, because you come here and you can't help but wonder, this is an extraordinarily fast-growing area.
Yep.
And, I keep wondering, when are you going to tell us you can't come?
Well, and we have to balance our growth with the needs that we have. And we've kicked the can down the road for a long time on water, and so we need decisive and aggressive action now. We need to put innovative ideas on the table for how we aggressively conserve water, how we can look at ways to increase our water supply.
What's one idea in conserving water that you think that the public can do? Is there like financial incentives? If you conserve water a certain much, you can get a discount on your bill, or what do you think?
Certainly, that's an idea. I think we need to look at larger scale. Bartlett Dam, which is on the Verde River system, they just increased their capacity. That water system is pretty healthy relative to looking at Colorado. And so some of the things that have worked there. And with Colorado, we really need to do more partnership with the basin states, because we're not in this alone in Arizona.
Another issue besides the election that has, I would argue, sort of been thrown on top is the abortion issue.
Yeah.
So you tell me, what role do you believe the position of governor will play here in this debate in the state of Arizona?
Well, what's clear is that the governor in Arizona is going to be the last line of defense to protect any remaining abortion rights we have left. And there's uncertainty right now. We'll have a court decision in a couple weeks on the Civil War era complete ban on abortion, whether that injunction is going to be lifted or not, and that's what Arizonans are under. During my time in the legislature, I fought back against the increased restrictions on abortion access, and I'll continue to do that as governor, and certainly veto anything new that comes to my desk.
If you're like the governor, you're going to have a Republican legislature, right? I mean, it's hard to imagine the way it's gerrymandered and all this stuff. I understand that. You're going to want to put in some protection on abortion rights.
Yeah.
But there's only going to be so far you can get a Republican legislature to do. Are you prepared to end up signing something into law that you today couldn't support, whether it's 15 weeks or something like that?
Well, we do have a 15-week ban that will go into effect. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So no, I'm not prepared to sign any new restrictions. Certainly, in Arizona, we have a robust initiative process, and that is absolutely an option for voters. And if we had had more time This cycle, we could have got something on the ballot this cycle.
And is that what you think is the road you'd like to see Arizona go down, is a referendum in 2024?
I think that's going to.
constitutional
I think that's going to be necessary. Yes.
You're the Secretary of State right now. There's a lot of people in this state, for various reasons, that question the integrity of these elections. How do you guarantee to the state of Arizona this is going to be a free and fair election?
This is going to be a free and fair election, just like 2020 was. We have rules and laws in place that were followed and are continuing to be followed. We have election officials who are committed to the integrity of the process, and they will continue to be. And every single allegation that was made about the integrity of the election was not true, and allegations that are continuing to be made.
Are you prepared for what Kari Lake's likely to do? We saw what she did before the primary, where she questioned the results before the ballots came in.
Yeah, it's absolutely clear that that is the playbook she's playing out of, and she's going to do it again, and we are absolutely prepared.
Final thing, last night, and these independent voters I talked to, they feel disenfranchised. They feel shut out from the process. They'd certainly like to see top 2, top 4, something like that, that allowed independents full access to the primary process and stay independent. Can you support something like that?
I think that's a discussion I'll be focused on after this election. There's folks trying to bring it to the ballot in 24. Certainly, I expect a lot of robust conversations about it.
This is, not everybody inside the party wants this, correct? Is that in the Democratic Party?
I haven't really talked to anyone in the party about it recently, so I'm not sure where folks are at. But I know that independents are a huge segment of our voting population, and we should be working to enfranchise them.
All right. Katie Hobbs, the Democratic nominee for governor, the current Secretary of State, which many people may not realize is actually next in line to be governor on that front. Katie Hobbs, stay safe on the trail.
Thank you so much.
Nice to see you. And we have reached out to Kari Lake's campaign. We were not able to schedule an interview with her while we were here in Arizona. We even were willing to accommodate some of those requests that their team made. We're still working on it. Still to come. We've got more on what the sweeping changes to Arizona politics could mean for 2022 and beyond. You're watching a special Meet the Midterms edition of Meet the Press Now. Welcome back to Meet the Press Now. We are live from Tempe, Arizona. And while we've been out here, Phoenix, the city itself, and nearly all of the American West, is experiencing one of the worst heat waves in recorded history. Sacramento and San Jose set all-time heat records yesterday with temperatures around 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which is just another day of the week sometimes here in Phoenix. And while the temperatures today are a few degrees cooler, millions of Americans from Montana to Arizona are under an official heat advisory. Yesterday, I spoke to the leader of a new office in the city of Phoenix of heat response and mitigation. His name's David Hondula. He's a climatologist, and he explained what his city is up against and how they are planning for this future.
We clearly don't have everything figured out here yet in Phoenix. People are getting sick and dying from heat at too high a rate. People in neighborhoods like this one ask and are concerned about their neighborhood being hotter than others. So we are still on our learning journey, but we are the hottest large city in the United States. I think we have a couple of strategies that are showing some promise. So we're really happy to be able to have that conversation with other cities and learn what they're doing.
I have a lot more of that interview on tomorrow's show. We'll talk about cool concrete, cool asphalt, I think it's called. Anyway, but it wouldn't be a real Meet the Press trip to Phoenix if we didn't get to spend a few minutes with KPNX's Bram Resnick. He hosts Arizona's political show of record. It's the Sunday Square Off. Our own Vaughn Hilliard is back with us as well. Bram, nice to see you.
Good to see you, Chuck.
So every time we come back, Arizona gets somehow purpler, if that's possible. So whatever we want to call that. So here we are. Kari Lake, look, how much did you know her as a colleague over the last 20 years?
I barely knew her at all in terms of face-to-face contact. In fact, the first time I think I got within about 2 feet of her was at a Trump rally in February of 2020 at the Veterans.
She was there as a journalist.
The Veterans Call. She was there to interview. Yeah. Donald Trump did not say a word to me.
Okay.
Hi, nothing, no contact. But, you know, we're in the same business. It's a small world we live in.
It's a small world. Everybody's pretty friendly.
And you kind of know what's going on.
Yeah. What, explain, you know, Vaughn's done a pretty good job explaining. I mean, how well known in the market is she? How well known in the state really is she?
She was an anchor for 20 years on one of the top-rated stations in Phoenix. Now, at the same time, it pains me to say this, as a TV guy, but over the years, that market has shrunk and shrunk.
Of course it has.
Shrunk.
We all know this in our business. Why do you think we're streaming?
All over the country. There you go.
This is where the viewers are.
Like markets all over the country. Yeah. So that audience has shrunk as well. One thing I'd add is people forget how fast this place is growing. It's 2 million people in 20 years. Yeah. The people who moved here in the last 10 years, say, have probably never heard of Kari Lake. May not have turned on a TV here. They all came from somewhere else, right?
Right.
And so, you have to keep that in mind when you try to judge how well known she is, especially outside the Phoenix metro.
All right. This Hobbs Lake debate issue. It seems as if, Vaughn, you've seen, and it was interesting, she's trying to find a format where I sort of understand it. I think Lincoln Douglas is about the only format she can hope for that might give her what she's looking for.
I think that the issue here is that Kari Lake works under alternative facts, right? She does not argue on evidence. She does not argue on actual vote counting, what we know to be a legitimate Joe Biden election here. Katie Hobbs, though, is also turning down what would be a free audience. There is the PBS debate that Ted Simons, he is always known to be the go-to debate in the state of Arizona. She has made
is that the clean elections debate?
This is the clean elections debate on PBS, but also airs elsewhere. And that is the debate that every single election participates in. Katie Hobbs has chosen not to take part of that. Kari Lake, on the other hand, said, debate me anywhere with any moderator here. It's kind of like the John Fetterman situation. Right. And this is tough. Kari Lake is not an easy one to go back and forth with, again, because you have to counterpunch on the set of facts there. At the same time, you're turning down an audience that is out there watching and listening.
Bram, I heard an interesting in my podcast today, talking with a former Republican consultant turned journalist back and forth, Jim Sharp, KTAR, and he said to me, the rumor going around is if Kari Lake wins the governorship, it's Kelly Ward will be the chief of staff.
That is indeed the rumor going around.
Kelly Ward, currently the state party chair. People have been watching the show, have heard. Kelly Ward, in some ways, is the avatar of this movement here in Arizona that has now become mainstream in the Republican Party. Kelly Ward is chief of staff with Kari Lake as governor. What's that going to be like?
I think it would send shivers through people in the business community when it comes to having to deal with the legislature, because they need the legislature to do a lot for them. It would send shivers. Well, it would thrill the legislature. As for what it would mean, who knows? Kelly Ward served 2 terms, if I recall, as a state senator from Lake Havasu City. Was back then known as Chemtrails Kelly. Now she is the leading avatar of the Trump party, which is what our Republican Party has become. I think it would be total chaos.
Where is the business community? Vaughn, it's interesting to me. I've always thought that if you were going to win the governorship here in Arizona, you had to be seen as pro-growth. And maybe the debate was smart growth versus too fast a growth. But you had to basically be a pro-business Democrat or certainly a Chamber of Commerce Republican. What are they doing in this race?
Right, and that's where you saw Katie Hobbs upon launching her own bid a year ago. She started to try and take the pro-business angle here and understanding the growth is important here. At the same time, look, Doug Ducey and allies have, tried to remain relevant within the Republican Party here today. Of course, he's the chair of the Republican Governors Association, and they are putting money, millions of dollars, behind Kari Lake. This is a difficult tightrope. I know I was talking to one individual, one candidate, who is running for the state legislature as a Republican, and there is an understanding that from the business community, the only way that you're going to be able to get anything accomplished with Kelly Ward or Kari Lake at the helm is by working with them, because they are very cutthroat. And so if you don't have access, if you don't have a decent relationship, in 2023, you're not going to go and get much done without them by your side.
Can I add one thing? Or 2 things, actually. Very significant. Jerry Colangelo, known as the owner of the Phoenix Suns, former owner of the Arizona Diamondbacks, former owner of the Suns. Right now, it's a big developer. He is the only mainstream person who has come out and endorsed Kari Lake.
Did he really?
Kind of surprising. He is, other than some pretty A lot of sketchy
Did he let Adam Silver know about this? I mean, is Jerry
not in the league,
still in
right?
charge of USA Basketball, though? I mean, he's been an important part of.
He's been an important part, an important player here. That was significant. I'd also add, on the flip side, today I got an invitation for a Katie Hobbs fundraiser that has many big names in the business community.
People that normally you wouldn't see at a Democratic
You
fundraiser.
might not see, including a lot of people on Team McCain.
Wow, that's fascinating. Bram and Vaughn, thank you both. Thank you for being with us this hour. We also want to thank our host today, the Top of the Rock restaurant, not making it up. The Marriott at the Buttes. That's right. They had a Top of the Rock restaurant. We didn't change the name. It was already here. It was meant for us here at NBC, right? For even more Arizona politics, be sure to get today's episode of the Chuck Toddcast. I talked to longtime journalist and host of KTR News, Jim Sharp. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. NBC News Now coverage continues with Tom Costello, who's in for Hallie Jackson.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.